Okay, welcome back. We're in Genesis chapter 1, and I'm hoping that today we can finish this chapter on the days of creation. Last time we went through the first, I think, 4 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
I want to come back to the beginning, that first line, and remembering where it begins and how the beginning is described. Because throughout the days of creation, there are times when God will declare things and say, it was good. And he says that the light was good. And later on, when he creates life from the third day, twice he says it was good. And then in the fourth day, when he fills with the creation of the stars, the moon, the sun, he says it was good. That's going to play into things later on when you have this whole fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But there's good and there's evil. And really, this verse 2, I think, is a description, a summary description of what evil is, what it looks like, because God is going to now speak things in to this and create that which is good. And so you can see verse 2, if we want to read that one more time, just verses 1 and 2. I'm going to start with you, Claudette. Would you read those two verses for us? Can you see it okay? How's that?
You're on mute, Claudette.
Okay. There you go.
Verses 1 and 2, right?
Yes.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
All right. So in verse 2, particularly the first part of it, we see three things that really sort of define the evil that we begin with. And by evil, we're not talking about a moral evil. There's nothing moral at this point here, but he's going to declare things that are good. And then there's this, the evil can also be that which is basically not good, that which is painful, that which is suffering, that which is not God's intent and not part of his good order. But the three things that are mentioned here about the situation that the earth was in at the very, very beginning, what are the three things?
Form, void, and darkness was over the face of the deep.
Yes. So it's first, it's without form, which means there's no clear boundaries, there's no clarity to it, there's no divisions, so to speak, and separations. There's no, it's just, everything's kind of mixed together. It's just, you can't discern anything here. It's just a blob kind of a thing. So it's a without form. That's an evil. And when he begins this work of creation, you'll notice so much of the first, particularly 3 days, is about creating form, separating things, separating light from the darkness, separating the evening from the morning, separating the waters above from the waters below. Those acts of separation are addressing that form issue. The second thing that describes the evil that we begin with is that phrase void, which means
Empty.
empty. Yeah. There's just nothing's there. It's just empty. It's that isn't an evil, that something should be there and there's nothing there. So there's no form to this. And then this is describes like a watery mass, which perfectly, I think, displays what this could look like. It's just, there's no form to it, like a watery mass in outer space, and it's empty. They're empty. There's nothing in there. There's no life. There's nothing in there to even see. And then the third thing is, there is darkness. So there's no light, nothing to be seen. And that really is all the forces of evil you can see are trying to draw us back into that chaos, into that formlessness, that void, that emptiness, that darkness. And you can see those powers in the world, can't you? Where things that are, there's an active movement to try to destroy all distinctives in some of the most basic forms. I mean, the transgender thing is a classic example of it. There's always been this clear distinctions between men and women. God made them male and female. There's clear distinctions between the two until the last, I don't know, what, 5 years. Now it's like no one knows what anything is anymore. And there's just this confusion between, it's all blended back. That's an evil. It's taking order and bringing it back into this a formless chaos. Same thing, in cities that are breaking down due to a lack of law and order. That there's no one knows their roles. People are breaking into stores, breaking down walls, these kind of things. This is all part of the works of evil and chaos, of bringing this formlessness again, and the void, the emptiness of life, just the emptiness of the soul, that there's this void that is happening there. And then, of course, the darkness, which is a classic picture of evil. But that's where he begins. And so the days of creation are all about
But one thing,
good. Yeah, go ahead.
one thing that just caught me on that, if you could just switch back to it for a second, is it's darkness was over the face of the deep, and God was hovering over the face of the waters.
Yeah.
I guess the deep was below the waters.
Well, the deep is the waters, we would say. So the darkness was over the face of the deep. So the deep basically is in darkness, and the Spirit of God is, so there's this anticipation now. There's the lights haven't come on yet, but the Spirit is, even in the darkness, is present here and ready to bring.
Yeah, it just caught me, the over the face of the deep, and darkness is over the face of the deep, but God is over the face of the waters.
Yeah, it's the same thing. The face of the deep and the face of the waters are the same basic thing. The deep is the waters. That's and so we first have the darkness of the face of the, and then this now the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters is, even the chaos, even the formlessness and the void is like the clay in the potter's hands, ready to be moved, ready to be shaped, ready to be filled. And that's what we see. So we went through the first 4 days last time, where he separates the light from the darkness. Again, distinctions. He calls the light good. The darkness was not good. The light is good. The darkness is evil. Second day, he separates the waters. There's nothing that he calls good here, because he doesn't really introduce any new thing just yet. He's just kind of separating and getting ready for the next day. But the third day, he creates the land, and it's the land that he sees that is good here. The land is orderly. You can set on it. You can live on it. Life can come from it. You can build on it. The waters, you can't. And so now we have that. And then the land begins to be filled with life and vegetation and fruit. And there we have more good happening there. And then day 4, he begins to now fill the heavens with the heavenly lights. And you'll notice the rule and the order that he brings about, where he defines the time and the seasons. That's a good thing. The sun defining every day, the moon defining the months, the stars defining the seasons, and giving order to things. So the sun rules over the day and the night, and the rules of the day, and the moon rules over the night, and that continues that separation. So that's where we left off last time, and God sees that it was good. Now we pick up in next day 5. So any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, after last week, I looked up on the internet the continent of, I think it's Pangea, and it shows how it's separated into the present day continents. And
Okay.
I just thought it was really neat, the video of it, imagining that God was, pulling them apart and putting them in their places like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
But there are a lot of videos of that online.
So that's what's it called again?
Pangea.
Pangea?
Yeah, that's the initial continent. There was one landmass that God separated.
So is it they're seeing it as that separation happened like during the flood? When
No, it's probably tectonic plates.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah,
I-
yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I like the point that was made last time about how many things happen after the third day. The third day is vegetation and other kinds of life right here. The
Mhm.
third day and day 6 is man having to do something with life. Jonah being regurgitated, for lack of a better word, on the third day. And of course, Christ being raised from the dead on the third day.
Yeah.
Then I came to I kept thinking, and it based on a sermon a couple of Sundays ago, I said, well, wait a minute, what about, I see that must be generally true, because what about when the Nile was turned into blood after 3 days, you said, right?
Was that after 3 days? I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that would, that one comes to a little halt right there. I mean, I'm trying to think, how is blood reminiscent of, or have something to do with, quote, life?
Yeah.
Right up until that time, those first 4 examples are dramatic on the third day.
They really are. And you kind of
Well,
see it
Didn't the wine also at the wedding, wasn't
wine.
that the third day?
on the
When they
third
ran
day.
out of
Yes.
the wine?
Yes. It was on the third day you have the wedding of Canaan. That he has he saves the wedding. But yeah, you see that pattern, keep that pattern in mind, that even Abraham, when he begins to offer Isaac, they make a point of it happening on the third day. Abraham sees where he's going to be going. But you'll notice the pattern, that the separation of light and darkness on day 1. Day 2, sort of a quiet day, separating the waters, but anticipating, and that's why nothing good is said. And then day 3, new life begins, and that's exactly the pattern for Christ on the cross. It's day 1 is the Good Friday, when this radical work is being done, signified by, it's interesting, let there be darkness in a sense at noon. We have this whole celestial scenes happening on Good Friday, and then day 2, Saturday, nothing much happens. It's a day of rest. And then day 3 is that resurrection, rising from the dead to bring fruit and life to all. It's a pattern that will come back again and again.
Doesn't that also include when they arrested Jesus and brought him to his trial? It was at night,
It was at night.
in the
So
darkness, which was unusual. That wasn't typical.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
would be the darkness of the evil.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was against their rules, said that all trials should be in the daytime. They violated the rules left and right for
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah, that was a total mockery. And it really began the night began on that Friday. It was when Judas leaves to betray him. It says it was night. That's when the night began. All right, we'll pick it up here, verse 20 to 23. We're looking now at day 5. What happens there? Bob Thomas, would you get that for us here? Day 5, 20 to 23.
Sure. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 5th day.
Okay, so that's a quick summary of what happens on the 5th day. We have, what is the creation of the 5th day?
Life, animal life,
Yeah, what kind of animal life? Very specifically, though.
The
birds and
birds.
fish.
Fish.
Birds and the fish. Okay.
Alligators.
I don't think so. I don't think they qualify for that.
They came on Monday.
They came on. Yeah, they came on. Right? Birds and the fish are created. The significance of them is, you'll notice, is he's going to declare them good. But let's go through what he says about them all here. So we first have God said. And what did God say on the 5th day here?
Let the water swarm with swarms of living creatures.
Okay, that's really interesting. Let the waters swarm. And then let the birds
Fly.
fly. Okay, let the water swarm and let the birds fly. So what's going on there? Why does he say, what do you think of when you hear the word swarm?
Lots of,
Geez.
A lot of
Oh.
them,
A lot of them, right? Just,
Mm.
it's just
like
filling the
swarms
sky.
of insects.
And when he says, let the birds fly, he doesn't just say, let there be birds. He says,
Mm.
let the birds fly. Why do you think he says, let the birds fly?
You're
Well.
getting ready for an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
When the birds fly, where are they when they fly? Obviously here.
in
In the sky.
Sky. So you say, so when we say let the water swarm with fish and sea creatures, they are filling the seas, right? And when we say let the birds fly, they're filling the sky.
Hmm.
So you can see that that's the point of it, because we know that birds don't live in the sky. They don't stay up there all the time. They have to come down. They have to rest. They've got to set up their nests. But the point is that in day 2, he separated the sky and the seas. He created these 2 great containers, the waters above the sky and the waters below the sea. And now in day 5, he fills those containers. That's been the pattern. Each day, the first 3 days, he creates containers. And then the next 3 days, he fills those containers. So day 1, he separates the light from the darkness. And so we have these containers of light and darkness. And then in day 4, he fills the light and the darkness. He fills the light, the day with the sun, and he fills the night with the moon and the stars. Day 2, he creates the sky and the seas. And on day 5, he fills the sky and the seas. And then on day 3, he creates the land. And of course, you can figure it out. Day 6, he will fill the land with the animals. So you kind of see how that all works here. There's a real pattern and order to this all. That's what God said. And then it says, so God created. And what does he create now? Let's see. What does he say here?
Mm.
great great sea creatures.
Great sea creatures. And
Every creature that moves.
every living creature that moves, particularly in the water, right? It's really in the water,
Mm.
and their kinds. And then he says, and God created also every winged bird,
Mm.
and all according to its kind. Okay. Now here's some interesting notes on this here. Why do you think he starts with the great sea creatures here? He starts there. When you think of the great sea creatures, what are we talking about here?
Whales.
The whales.
God creatures.
Whales, sharks, dolphins.
I was reading notes and they said Leviathan.
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 That is a great sea creature. You know, you're talking about that Leviathan. What in the world is that?
Evil, isn't it?
It's a sea monster. Yeah, the great sea creatures. It's very important to note are symbolic of the powerful evil forces in the world. The devil is, in a sense, a great sea creature. He is the dragon that comes out of the sea. The point being made is that he will say this to Job as well. He'll call out Leviathan in the book of Job, and he says how let me see if I can find that one real quick, because that's a great passage. I'm going to stop this sharing here. I'm gonna call up the my Bible software here. See
It's
that?
around, yeah, it's around 38,
Isaiah too.
38 around there.
Yeah, let me just type in Leviathan. And I think it's yeah, Job.
Oh, no, 41,
One.
41:1.
And this is really good. This is a great picture because Leviathan is absolutely that great sea creature we're talking about here. Jack, would you read that for us? 41 down to 11, because he says a lot about him.
Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope on it in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you to take you from your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low, even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me, who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine.
Yeah. He keeps going on and on. In fact, this whole chapter is about Leviathan. And just about the fearsomeness of Leviathan. You cannot control him. And this is the one creature that just, it cannot be tamed. He cannot be conquered. He dwells in the sea. We don't know exactly what he's talking about here. Is this a sea serpent? Is this some kind of a monster? And you start looking at some of those museums now, they have these ancient, sea dinosaurs. You wonder if this is what was in mind. But it's like you won't dare mess with them. And yet that's the very first thing mentioned on day 5 that God created, showing he created this creature. Do not think for a minute that the powerful forces in this world that are represented as in rebellion to God are anything more than creatures. They're creatures. They're not the creator. And though they're opposed to their creator, they are still creatures. And so the devil himself is a creature, one who was created by God. Though in rebellion and though out of complete control and terrifying to us, yet he is, what does he say? What does Luther say? Even the devil is God's devil. He created him and he has sovereignty over him. And I think that day 5 is a very helpful word to us, that even the great sea creatures, the most fearsome, terrifying aspects of creation that are beyond our control, God created those too, along with all the other beings. All right, and every winged bird. And then we have one more time in this passage here, then God saw. So God said, God created, and now God saw. And what does he see? It was good. What was good about it? It takes on that.
We had created
that?
life.
Life, right? Life, and it was filling
The earth and the seas.
his order. Remember, the emptiness is bad. Filling is good. Darkness is bad. Light is good. Void is bad. Filling is good. What was the other thing? Formlessness is bad. Order is good. And so here we have what is good about this. He's filling 2 places that were up to this point empty. Now it's good. All right. And then he says, but now he does something new that he hasn't done yet before. What does he do here that's a little extra that he hasn't done before?
Tells them to go multiply.
God blessed them. And what does he say? Be fruitful,
and multiply.
multiply,
Mm.
fill the waters and the seas, and what's the next part? Let birds multiply on the earth.
Yes.
Okay. And that's when something you're going to see with God from throughout this is his intent is to fill, to keep filling and multiplying. And that's why that will help explain a lot of why, for example, the Tower of Babel was a great evil. There was a lot of evil to it, but one of the evils was that man was not filling the earth, but rather was gathering in one place to try to make a name for themselves there and not filling the earth. That's the intent. He wants all the waters to be filled with life. And so be fruitful and multiply. And he wants all of the sky to be filled. And you can see the evil of our day. One of the things that you hear, if you've noticed, one of the evils that you will hear continually is, you may have noticed this from our scientists, our experts, they keep warning us of overpopulation. You've heard this,
Mm.
right? That's what's going to bring this world down, which is a direct opposition to what God has revealed. He wants the earth filled. You cannot outgrow God's care for us. But they make this seem that if we have too many people, we're going to run out of resources, right?
Mm.
And so therefore, that's why it leads to great evils, like in China. They had that one-child policy
Mm.
for so long, and they're killing their babies. And they're having forcing mothers to kill their babies. And now they're looking back at that as a big mistake because they realize their problem is not too many people in China. The problem is too few. They don't have enough. They
Mm.
don't have enough young people. And as the old people are getting older and they don't have enough young people to care for them, and they're going to have a population collapse. It's what they're seeing in all these countries. It's very concerning.
And because of what they did, the Chinese people would kill the female child so they could have male child.
Yeah.
They've got
Mm.
too many sons and no daughters for them. And so they're leaving their country to find women.
Yeah.
Mm.
When you start messing with God's order, that's the evil. You can see it's really interesting how the evil constantly attacks the order of things, wanting to go back to a formlessness where you can't tell anything apart, to the darkness, having things, hiding things and keeping things done in secret, and also going back to an emptiness. It wants us to be empty, isolated, in darkness, formless and void. The evil force in the world are moving us toward those things. And it's helpful to see how God defines what's good.
Mm.
That's
You-
why
you just-
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you just used the word that made me think, the book, Live Not by Lies. One of the tactics in that book, as you recall, was the evil ones, for lack of a better term, trying to isolate us.
Yeah.
And the tremendous destructive power of keeping people isolated instead of fellowshipping.
And think about the good things in this life. They are like the family. Like this is the human family. It's so good. It's like the nuclear family that we talk about that really is so good for society. It fills all those things we talked about here against the evil. There's an order to it. It has form. It's clearly defined. You have the mother, the father, children in a home together. There's an order to it. You know who's in the family. You know who's not in this particular family. So there's an order and a clarity to what it is. It's not void. It's filled with life. And as children come forth in the love of this union of the man and the woman, and it's the living out without the darkness and the it's something that is publicly done. It's not sneaking around. You have public ceremonies for the family, the wedding and so forth. It's out in the open. That's a blessing. But so much of our society wants to make it so that there's really no definable, committed relationships here. promiscuous sex, the without form, the abortions and the birth control that is being promulgated everywhere, keeping wombs empty. And then the darkness sneaking around in secret and doing these things. It's just, you can see the evil everywhere, drawing us back to that. And God, from the very beginning, defining clearly what is good. What is good. That's why those little phrases of "it was good" take note of them. Take note of when God says something is good. And so that's where we.
Oh, Pastor, I was thinking as we talk about even the void and kind of the inability to identify, and I think about these LGBT people, and when I've been thinking about it, when I see someone out in public and they look half male, half female, I look at them and I'm like, are you a man or a woman? So then what becomes the problem is, how do you identify them if you don't know them? If you're out in the store and you see a clerk working, do you say, do you approach them and talk to them like they're a female or a male, because you can't identify them by how they look? But I think that leads to their lostness, because
Absolutely.
people don't know how to identify them, and they don't realize that they become almost void of being their personality and who they were. Just like this young girl, this woman that killed the students in Nashville. I mean, the first couple of days, it was, is she a man? Is she a woman? There was so much going back and forth that they're losing their sense of their identity. And that is darkness.
Yeah. It's really interesting. The evil term being used is non-binary.
Yeah.
It's that gender is a construct, a spectrum, that there is no clear definition between this and that. And then it ends up, and these young people are being shoved down their throat. They're being taught to believe this, and they're absolutely miserable, and they don't know why. They don't know why they're so miserable, because what is so key to our identity, as we're going to see in the next section, is our being made male and female. As a key aspect of our humanity. And when you take that away from someone, they don't know what they are. They're back in the chaos. Just imagine living in that watery mass, empty, darkness, void. That's their souls. That's how they feel. And why there is so much. I don't know if you know that, since this is the 4th transgender mass shooter in the last 4 or 5 years. It's a mental illness. It's distressing. They're tormented souls. I mean, my heart breaks for them in some ways here. But they've been lied to. It's the evil in the culture that has been lying to them and going against God created order and setting up their own, and it's leading to a dark chaos. It's a scary time for them. All right, so that's day 5.
Just a quick, you're missing the R on the earth at the end of day 5.
Thank you. Okay, very good. All right, so we're on day 6 now. Let's take a look at that. Teresa, would you read for us, if you can see it there, 24 and 25? Is that big enough?
A little bigger, please. Thank you. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creepy things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that crept on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. Now you're going to see that day 6 is similar to day 3. Day 3, we had, if you remember, we had 2 parts to it. We had the separation of the creation of the seas and the land, and it was good. And then we had part 2 where he fills it with the fruit and the veggies. So in day 6, you're going to have a day 6A and a day 6B. Again, a second set of thirds. On a day 6A, the first part of day 6, what does he create? On day 6?
Amazing living
Creatures.
Yeah.
The animals on the land.
Yeah, we'll call it the land animals.
Mm.
Let's go through them here. All right, so God said, and what does he say?
Let the
Let's,
earth bring
The earth
forth.
bring forth living creatures according
So
to their
that would be the mammals and the reptiles.
okay. So that would be, according to their kinds, that'd be livestock, creeping
creeping things
things,
and beasts.
beasts of the earth.
Yes.
Okay, so the creeping things could be what?
Insects,
That could be
Snakes,
insects,
snakes, yeah.
lizards,
reptiles, etc. The beasts, and then you have the live. So you have the livestock, which would be
Cows.
cows, right? These would be your
sheep, goats,
your domesticated animals.
Mm,
Farm animals.
Yeah, and then your beasts would be your wild animals,
lions,
lions,
tigers,
tigers.
bears.
Oh my! All right. So
Hey, Pastor, in New King James, it talks about these living things as having souls.
guys,
Is that just an interpretation thing, or are they believed to have souls?
where does it say that? What does it say?
I'd have to go look it up. If you want to continue, I'll go find it.
Well, one of the things we're going to get to in chapter 2 is you'll see. Let's hold off for chapter 2 because it'll describe a little how the animals were created. He doesn't. How did he create the animals? Do you see it here? So the animals come from the earth. He'll tell us also in chapter 2 that they come from the ground. He's going to make the animals out of the dirt. The difference is with mankind, he's going to breathe his breath into the dirt. So there's something in mankind, a divine breath that separates him from the animals. I think there's some other passages in scripture that do speak to animals as not having souls, that like to die like a dog is to die, without the soul, sort of just to go. So it's I don't think there's anyone in the scriptures that talk about animals having souls.
Talk about the man having a living soul. That's it.
A living soul. So soul can be a complicated thing because sometimes we talk about, like, if there's a plane crash, they'll say there were 200 souls on board.
Mhm.
It's a reference to 200, beings that were on there. So it can be used interchangeably. All right, so he makes the beasts all according to their kinds. That's going to be a phrase he uses a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Why does God do things according to their kinds?
Because he knew evolution was coming. He wanted to blow away that thought.
Note order in creation. There is an order. He's filling the earth. Order is good. When he distinguishes between animal and kinds, that's a good thing. So when you see a dog, that's a dog. It's not a cat.
Right.
That lion is not a cow. There are distinctions between them. And most of the animals, they cannot breed with each other. Now, there are some cases where, like, a lion and a tiger can get together and they can have a liger. They actually have those things. It's true. They actually have that. But those are so close together as cats. But you don't see, dogs and cats getting together, or, reptiles and birds, or whatever it is. Everyone keeps to its own kind. There's an order to the creation that is very important. That's good. And it's really interesting, again, why evolution, there's an evil in evolution theory, because it denies the order and says that we're all kind of, morphed into each other. There is no distinguishing order between that. You as a human being, you're just a gnat 6 billion years down the road. there's really no distinction between you. You know, just over time it evolves and it becomes you. That's a great evil, because there's a very clear order that he establishes in creation. And it's going to be very important. And again, the evil forces in the world are keep trying to bring us back to the chaos, back to the emptiness, back to the darkness.
I would say that one of the things I picked up when I went down to Kentucky, with your example of like the lion and the tiger getting together, they are of the same kind.
Right,
Whereas like down in Kentucky, they've got a Zorse, a zebra and a horse cross.
right,
You know,
True.
they're the same kind, so.
yeah,
Isn't
Yeah.
a mule a combination as well?
yeah.
Yes.
And usually the combinations, don't they usually become sterile? Like they can't,
Yes.
Theoretically, yeah.
They can't reproduce. Yeah.
which is kind of interesting too.
Mm.
All right, so the next part, is that God saw what? Again, it was good. So on day 6, you can have twice that God sees things that are good. So day 6
Pastor,
is very important.
It seems that if there was evolution and survival of the fittest and all that, that things would evolve toward being a similar organism that takes best advantage of its environment. And
Mhm.
so we're not seeing that. We're seeing that everything is according to its own kind and continues to stay that way.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and again, we believe in evolution in the sense that, you know, animals adapt to their climates,
Right.
that they can change colors and shapes and sizes,
Yeah.
but a horse doesn't become something other than a horse. It remains its kind.
And we
And that's
believe in microevolution.
Yeah, that's where they confuse you. They throw you off with that.
Mm.
They do. It's called it's a little bit of it's a really a clever debating tactic where you define a word one way and you prove it, and then halfway through you switch the definition to mean something else and act as if you've proven it. So evolution will keep saying, hey, you know, here's the proof. What's the proof for evolution? Well, here's the proof. You know, we have, you know, squirrels that, you know, when a squirrel goes and lives in the city, it becomes dark color. When it goes out in the country, it changes color, or fish or birds adapt and so forth like that. Clearly, you can see that. Okay, fine. I agree with that. See, that's evolution. And that's the proof that we basically evolved from the slime and from the
Right.
bacteria. We became what we are. I'm like,
I've heard him talk about people were a lot shorter yesteryear. Just go in a French chateau and people were short. Now they're tall. See, evolution, macroevolution. No, he's still a man or a woman.
yeah,
He's not a zebra.
it's really interesting. By the way, there's if you're interested, there's a lot of scientists now who are not Christians at all, who are starting to speak out against evolution because they're just like, it's got nothing. There's nothing there. There's no evidence for it. It's a dying theory. And there's some one guy is he's a secular Jew, David Berlinski. And he says in one of his books, which I called The Devil's Delusion, where he's addresses these atheist scientists. And he says, basically, you know, he doesn't believe in evolution. He says, because I think as a theory, it doesn't make any sense. It just states things evolve, whatever. And then secondly, there's no evidence for it. And they're like, how can you say that there's no evidence for it? And he says, well, you go to the museum, right? And you see the horses, right? They have the little horse and it's a little bit bigger and then a bigger, and you got the big horse. You see it evolve over time, right? And he says, yeah, and there's arrows between each horse, right? He says, I'm curious, where did they find the arrows? You know, so the idea is that they've just arranged things according to, they create a theory and then they just fill the evidence to fit the theory, as opposed to following the evidence where it may or may not lead them. But anyway, that's
Although I will say this, Carol Davies continually loses the morning link for the prayer thing. And we have to keep sending it to her so she can get on the prayer meeting. So we have concluded that we need to start calling her the missing link.
oh boy, okay.
She might be proof for evolution. Who knows?
Careful.
You're way off, Rob.
There you go. All right, so day 6B, let's talk about that. And Rob, why don't you read that for us here? 25 and 20 down to 27. We'll just start there for now.
Oh, 26 to 27?
26, 27, yeah, sorry.
Okay. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
All right, let's start here. So day 6 now, we have the creation of, let me come back here. Creation of the land animals in day 6A. Day 6B now is the creation of
Man.
man. Okay. All right.
And since we know we don't look like God, how is it that we created after his image and likeness? Is that our
Yes.
soul?
Let's talk about that. That's a great question. So we'll start with that. So God said, let us make man in our image
Mhm.
after our likeness.
Mm.
Now, there's some different theories about what that means. Some very interesting takes on this. The first question is, when God says, let us,
Mm.
what does he mean by let us?
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
All right, so there's some different theories on this. That is, there's one angle is that let us is a reference to the Trinity. However, that's not how the Jews would have understood it, is it?
No,
Heavenly hosts?
Yes, the let us for the Jewish perspective is the God speaks to the heavenly host, particularly to these sons of God, these who have authority in the spiritual realm.
Hmm.
So, and to them he says, let us make man in our image like us. And so they would argue that that to be made in God's image in that way, made in the image of God and the authorities in heaven, means man is given dominion over the earth. You kind of can see that, can't you? We haven't gotten to it yet, but he will give them at the end. He says, I will give you dominion over the fish and birds of the air and all that moves on the earth. So that's one take on this, that man is made like God, like the Elohim, like the heavenly host, these spiritual authorities in the heavenly realms, and he is going to be given dominion over the earthly realms. That's clearly in mind here because he says it specifically there too. Other possibilities are that made in the image means what?
We share God's communicable attributes. Heard that one?
We share attributes of God, such as
We can be loving.
Yeah.
We can be just.
yeah, we'll call them moral attributes of him.
Moral agents.
Yeah, moral agents. We are creative. There's no other creature on earth that creates like we do. We have this need to create and to develop. I mean, you know, foxes and on the birds are still building nests the way that they've always built nests, but we are building skyscrapers now. And we are building all kinds of things. We have this something in us that has to create, has to build. We have to make things, and the arts, religion, there's a spiritual life to us. We'll call it spirituality. We all have this sense that you don't see in the other animals. Language is another big one. Ideas. There's so much that,
How about
Clearly,
free will?
yeah, free will. Sure. That we have, again, we are moral agents. That's why you don't see, you can see the animals. We were watching it the other day. Just pondering, how do the animals know to do what they do? So here's something really interesting. So we saw this this thing on YouTube of a family that rescued a beaver. A little baby beaver got lost from his family and was adopted by a family. You see this? And they
Yeah.
bring the beaver home. Thing's adorable, right? And the beaver is creating dams in the hallway, gathering the toys and setting up dams in the hallway. How does it know to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no need for it. Nothing can explain that except that God has created something in them, sort of programmed each animal to do what it does and to know how to do what it does. It's incredible. On the other side, we are not like animals. We're not like beasts. We're not appetites. There is a moral agency to us, a free will to us by which we make choices and do things. We have to be taught to learn things, and there's accountability and responsibility for us, which is why there is heaven and hell for the human being, because we are moral agents. So it's really very interesting. All right, made in the image of God. There's different takes on this. I have to say, I'm kind of on, I can see both sides of this. I can see that the idea that this is the Trinity speaking here, that God is in his own, with the Father and the Son, reflecting upon and making us in his image, and he does make us in his image, male and female, which is kind of a reflection of the Trinity there, as we'll see in a minute. On the other side, the heavenly host thing also makes some sense, because he does give them dominion over the earth, just as there are princes and principalities and authorities in the heavenly realms. So however you want to parse it, I think it can go either way.
You know what I find amazing, as talking to Jehovah's Witnesses over the years, I have never found one that had any comeback. When I said, "Who is us?" They didn't offer these two options here. They always diverted to another subject that had no clue to offer any suggestion.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. One more thing, made in the image of God, that he's going to say here is, made in the image of God equals we are male and female.
Where was the female in the Trinity?
Well, you would say that the man and the woman are oftentimes, and you'll see in the New Testament, a reflection of the Father and the Son. It says that the Son is the glory of the Father and the woman is the glory of man.
Yeah.
And you really see that. I tell you what, on the when you see God in the book of Genesis, you will see him displayed in a number of different ways, and well, two main ways. You'll see God, who is the invisible God, who is above all things, cannot be seen, and works powerfully behind the scenes. But then you have the Lord God, who appears and walks among us and comes as a man and interacts with us in a very physical form. And they're both the same God, yet they are two clearly, there's the God invisible and God the visible. And in a wedding, you really see this beautifully. You have, God the Father is the one who is the head, the authority, but he's the invisible one. And he's behind the scenes, and all of his joy and pleasure is in the Son, who is his glory and image. And everything is for the Son to be put on display. And the Son submits to the Father. The Father loves the Son and glorifies him. And you see that at a wedding, for example. Everything we communicate in a traditional wedding is that the man is sort of that authority. He's the one, the father gives away the daughter. and she wears the veil, a sign of authority over her, where she comes under the protection of her husband now, who takes her in. And yet at the same time, the husband is pretty much invisible. You can't distinguish him from the ushers. Looks just like him.
Hmm.
It's the bride who shines. She's the glory of the scene. And that's a lot of how the way the father and the son interact. Is the son is everything's about the son. The father, every time he speaks, is about the son. This is my son, whom I love, and everything's about that. And the son just submits to his father, and comes under his authority. So there's that relationship, I think, that is reflected here. But there's this distinction: the two persons, male and female, made in the image of God, are one is not sufficient to be made in the image of God. We are male and female, and then male and female, and then commanded, if you notice, to multiply.
Hmm.
So the family reflects the Trinity, as we talked about in our foundations class too.
I used to feel the Holy Spirit represented the female side. And I don't know where I got that from, but I just used to feel that.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything that could point to that.
some actually do that, although the Spirit is always referenced in the masculine too. They're all referenced as he's in the Bible. So I don't, how to play it out. It's there's a lot to think about, but one thing we can say is that when God creates man in his image, it's not one man that can do it. The male cannot reflect the image of God. It's the male and the female together. And you're going to see that in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You're going to see the masculine and the feminine virtues on display in him. So he is the Almighty, like a mighty in battle is the Lord. And yet he is compassionate and kind, gracious. He's described as beautiful. So there's those are the kind of things that we praise women for being, as well as, so you're going to see it all wrapped up in God, and both are necessary to make this work. Again, why the devil seeks to continue to confuse us on that, to say that it's really interesting to say that male and female are a construct of society, that we created those categories. Is ridiculous. It's a great offense, and it's causing great harm. So
Has there been any thought, or do you have any ideas on why the God creating man is plural initially and then singular in verse 27?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's a good question. That's why I think I actually think let us, if I were to look at this passage now, I would say, let us, God is speaking to the heavenly host when he says that. But when he gets to 27, it's about God himself in his triune form, reflecting upon that male and female both together in one reflect his image, not just a singular man. He will say, when he creates the man in chapter 2, if you remember, he'll say, it is not good for the man to be alone. That's an evil. It is not good. The man and the woman need to be together. They need each other. And that's what will properly reflect me. So clearly in chapter 20, verse 27, the image now is focused on God himself. And we would say, from a New Testament perspective, in the Trinity. In verse 26, he is referencing the dominion as he speaks to the heavenly host. Let them have dominion over the fish. So that's what we share with the heavenly host, is as they share dominion over the spiritual realms, we share dominion over the earthly realms. But in 27, we see that we're created in God's image in a way that reflects direct triune nature of God. That's how I would argue it. But,
so at this point, is this actually Adam and Eve that he's created?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah, that would be certainly, he's gonna zoom in on that moment in chapter 2
Okay,
and give this is a summary statement, but he's gonna zoom in to show us how he does it. But in this church, he just says that he does it.
the reason I asked that is in, further on, when they are banished from Eden, and they say, they're fearful that the others out there will hurt them. Just what those others were, if there was other
Oh, you're talking
Man.
about you're talking about Cain when he
Cain,
is
yeah,
cast out. And by that time, there were many people on the earth. Remember, Eve, Adam and Eve had many children, not just Cain and Abel and Seth.
Mhm.
It says that, they just focus on Cain and Abel. But when we get there, Eve would have been having kids right away.
Mm.
And she could have there could have been thousands of people on the earth by the time Cain is banished. And there would have been many of those people who would have loved Abel, guaranteed, who would have sought to avenge him, after what happened to him. So the story is told in a way, in our picture books from our Bibles when we were kids, make us think there was only like 4 people on the earth at that time. But that's not so. That is not so at all. It's just the story focuses on those people because those are the people that matter in the narrative he's giving, in the story he's unfolding. The other people are there. They just don't play into the narrative like that. Does that make some sense?
Well,
So, where does Cain get his wife is always the question, right?
another thing that comes to my mind now is, I don't recall if there's anything in scripture that tells us that Adam and Eve were banished from Eden before Cain and Abel came along or after.
They would have been banished before. They would have been
Yeah,
kicked out of Eden
that's-
before it happened.
That's kind of what I
then,
thought.
And then, kicked out of the garden anyway.
Mm.
And then Eden means paradise. So the world was paradise at the beginning. And then you had this garden where the Lord dwelt with them. We're going to get to all that in chapter 2. We're getting ahead of ourselves. But then they're kicked out of that garden. It's taken away from them. And then really the earth is cursed. It's no longer Eden at that point. It's no longer paradise. So, all right, let's, I think we got just a couple minutes left here. So they have dominion over the earth, and God creates them in his image. And let's just finish up 28 to 31. Let's see. Elizabeth, would you get that for us?
Sure,
Sorry.
that's okay. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day.
Okay. So let's look at this passage here. So we have God said, and then we have, oh, shoot. Hang on a second. Let me get this right here. Oh, not working for me right now. All right, let me try this again. So we have God. What's going on? All right, try that. Okay, so God, the next thing is that God created, we got that before, created man in his image. Talked about that, male and female. And then we have God blessed them. That's where we are now, right? Okay, just like he did with the fish and the birds. Now God blessed them. And what does he say to them again?
Be fruitful
Fill
and
the
multiply,
earth.
fill the earth.
Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and
Subdue it.
do it. So you're going to see again God's plan of creation. So he hands it over to us now to continue to fill the earth. Remember, filling is good. And not just to multiply and fill the earth, but to subdue it, to maintain the order of things. So the whole picture of the garden, just think about a garden. It's like how much work goes into having a garden. You have to tend it. You have to maintain it. You have to subdue it. You have to create the order and pull out the weeds and make sure things are pruned and so forth like that. You have to do that work. That's the good work that we're called to do. The evil is causing us to forsake these things, to not be fruitful, to be barren, and to not multiply and fill the earth, and not to subdue the earth, and not to be lazy, and to not tend it, to let it overgrow, to let it decay. You go to places like I think Detroit is facing some of this right now, is this kind of urban decay where people are moving out and they're just leaving their homes. And what happens to a house that's been abandoned? It falls apart, the weeds overgrow it, it becomes a hideous, evil thing, because we're meant to maintain and to subdue and to order things. So, and to have dominion. Okay, so we're going to subdue the earth. And then we're going to have dominion over what?
Over the fish and the birds,
Fish,
over every living thing.
birds, animals on the earth, pretty much everything, every living thing. Okay, so that's the first thing here. We have dominion over the fish, the birds, and the animals. This is why we can go to fine restaurants and we can order the fish without a guilty conscience. Murdered a fish, murdered a cow. No, it's like we have dominion over these things. We have order. That's why we have pets in our homes that we you might look at them and say, oh, they're treating them like your slaves. They're animals. We have dominion over them. It's an appropriate thing. Why it's an inappropriate thing when we treat other human beings like we treat animals. With that, you don't do that to human beings. So
You're making me feel good, Pastor. I felt a little bit of guilt over the years blasting rodents that are digging up my grass, but I'm feeling much better all of a sudden.
Good. They're evil, right? They're evil. They're bringing the chaos. But you can see the evil that they're doing, even though they're not evil creatures. They're just creatures, right? But they are the kind of chaos that they can bring, the destruction they can bring, the things that ruin life. Are to be opposed. All right. God said, next, he says some more instructions for us in verse 29.
Giving us plants for food.
Okay. Every tree and fruit with seed and fruit, right? Every plant yielding seed, okay, and fruit. Every plant is for food. And also for the animals too. Okay, every green plant for food. And it was so. God wants us to be vegans, right? I
Well,
mean, that's clearly the case, right? We're not supposed to eat
Yes.
the animals.
yeah, that was until the fall.
When does he allow us to eat the animals,
After the fall, right?
You remember what chapter it was?
I
It was
don't-
with Peter when he said, kill and eat.
Oh, that's much, much later. But before that, is Genesis 9 after the flood. With the new creation, he says, I've given you the animals now for food. But right now they're vegans. Right now they just eat the plants and the trees and the fruit. That's for them and for all the animals too. And then says God saw everything, and what does it say?
It was very good.
everything, and he pronounces the benediction, everything. It's very good. Okay. And that is the end of the days of creation. That's where we're going to end today. Next time we'll pick up the next day, and we'll do a refocus of the creation story, but from a ground level perspective. So, all right.
I have a couple of memorable things when I was a kid. My dad brought us all downstairs to the TV room, and he wanted us to see Neil Armstrong step out in 1969. Didn't want us to miss it. So I'm grateful for that. But the year prior was Apollo 8, 1968, when they came around the dark side of the moon, and then we had that beautiful picture of the Earth, incredible, in blue and all that kind of stuff. And he
Yeah.
read Genesis 1.
Oh, that's awesome.
Beyond
Right.
here. If you guys have never seen that,
Yeah.
Google Frank Borman, Apollo 8, reading Genesis 1. It's shocking.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
I would dare to say, Rob, that the majority of us here were probably alive for that.
Yeah. Pastor might not, he's just a young guy, but
I was, what year was that? 68, 69?
1968. And it was on I almost want to say it was Christmas.
Christmas Eve, I
Christmas,
think.
right? Christmas
Yeah,
Eve. Yeah, they
Christmas
come
Eve.
around they come around where it's no contact on the dark side of the moon. They come around the moon, they're facing the Earth, and there it is, beautiful photo of the bright blue and white Earth. And they had told this article, by the way, was in our Daily Bread last month. And they said, do whatever you want to do. Whatever you think is appropriate is what they told the crew. And Armstrong and his two compadres, they read Genesis 1, staring at this Earth.
Huh.
So it's worth listening to.
We'll have to
It's
find that. Maybe next time we'll
Genesis,
play that.
Genesis, Apollo 8, 1968.
That's great. All right. I'm going to stop recording here.